Welcome to the Building Hamilton Show with Ken Bekendam, brought to you by LegalSecondSuites.com on 900 CHML. My name's Rick Zamperin. Hey, get more out of your home and book a free consultation today with Ken and his team online at LegalSecondSuites.com because, well, this is a big issue. We've talked about it on previous shows, Ken. Legal second suites, affordable housing, creating those secondary dwelling units, those additional dwelling units that we desperately need in this community to create a win-win situation for homeowners, to get some extra income, for people who obviously need a place to stay, and that will open up other housing units for other people who are going to be coming to this community in droves. So I thought it would be a nice time to refresh our listeners' memories about what LegalSecondSuites.com is all about, how you got started, what you do, the process that goes into it. So maybe we'll go back to day number one, Genesis chapter 1 of Ken Bekendam and his journey into this wonderful world of creating opportunities for individuals. How did it all begin?
Yeah, thanks, Rick. You know what? It's always a pleasure to be here with you and to talk about this very important topic of legal second suites and creating these much needed units. I really got into this space back in 2018. Or even a couple of years before that. I was working a full-time job. I was actually working as a landscape designer for a contractor in Oakville. And through that landscape design industry, I got exposed to, CAD work, drafting, architectural design, doing building permit submissions for, at the time, it was doing like decks and covered porches, right. Pool houses, pool cabanas, all of that type of stuff that was, part of creating, people's backyards and these backyard oases. But during that time, me and my wife, we had a small bungalow right here in Hamilton, and we converted our basement into a secondary dwelling unit, and we rented it out to McMaster students. And for us, that was the catalyst for us to truly realize the financial freedom or the financial stability that can come when you have this consistent secondary income coming into your life on a monthly basis. And realizing that through that experience that, couple things. One, we've created more financial stability in our lives. Two, we're providing quality housing for people who need a place to live. In this case, it was students. And it was the catalyst for basically stirring within me like this entrepreneurship of having like this small little business where you have to track your income, your expenses, you have to advertise, you have to develop your people skills, your sales skills, how to engage with your customer, which, in this case was our tenants. And that kind of laid the framework for me to basically start this company, purely focusing on creating secondary units and helping other homeowners and other property investors create these units for themselves. And so this really took off in 2018. This is right around the time when, the province and the municipalities were starting to relax the zoning bylaws, making it more permissive to add these units. And then every year, after that, the demand just continued to increase. And it's to the point now where right now we're in a crisis and we need these units. And now it's definitely affecting even the middle class where they have to be adding these units within their homes just to keep life affordable.
Yeah. When you were originally at the idea and you're renting out, your basement to McMaster students, when did the light bulb go off for you to say, well, we can make a business out of this?
Well, yeah, like after, that first year, when you see that income coming in on a monthly basis and you're tracking all of your expenses, your mortgage payment, your interest on that mortgage, your property taxes, your insurance, all of your utility bills, and you see that there is extra money left over at the end of the month, that was a big, light bulb moment for me that said, hey, look, by doing this, we can create some extra income for ourselves and having this secondary source of income. And at the time, home prices were less, 5 years ago. And, you could actually create some positive cash flow. It's not so much anymore with current interest rates and home prices and stuff like. Even with the higher rent prices, just having a bungalow with one basement apartment unit, it's not as it's not as profitable, if you will, as it was. But that's not to it's still very important to be creating that secondary income in your life.
When you had that light bulb go off, now you're thinking, okay, now we got to start a brand new business. Who did you rely on? Who did you lean on? Was it past experiences? Was it past coworkers in the landscaping business? Who really kind of mentored you along to say this is how it should be done?
Well, it's like the journey of any entrepreneur. It's a trial and error. I didn't have any sort of golden solution or this golden team of people surrounding me at that time. I was very much a owner operator, very much entrenched in the business myself, wearing 50 different hats. I was the bookkeeper, the accountant. I was the drywaller. I was a painter. I was everybody. I was the designer. I was doing everything. And, basically out of, desperation for my own time, that's when I started kind of searching out other people to help me. And the big thing for me at that time was the amount of designs and permitting work that I was doing at that time on my own. And so I reached out to actually Mohawk College. Oh, wow. And I tapped into their architectural technologist program. And it was through that I was able to get my first co-op student, Freddie. Who's actually still with me today. Oh, and he's actually my design manager. Wow. Managing our team. And that was a huge catalyst for our company to basically really get organized, really start taking things seriously as a company. It's not just little, side hobby, if you will. This is an actual legitimate company now. And I got my first employee, and big kudos to Freddie in our office, who really just got us on the right track, and helped us incorporate some important softwares such as Monday.com, which we use a lot to just organize all of our projects.
When it comes to Freddie and design planners, design managers, how integral is that to the operation? Because I would imagine without a design, you're kind of listless. You're not sure what to do.
Yeah, no, everything starts with a properly done design, right? Architectural drawings that are, detailed, properly dimensioned, properly scaled, show all the technical detail that is required by the particular building department and, representative of the building code and compliance with zoning bylaws. It is very technical work, doing proper permit drawings. And when you're getting into, somewhat technical work, it's all about the details, right? And being very detail oriented. And when you're scaling up and you're doing, upwards of 150 permit applications a year, at least that's what our office is doing right now. That's a lot of details on a lot of different projects, a lot of different moving parts that have to be kind of coordinated. And so for us, it was vital that we had a proper project management software to help us kind of just keep everything tracked properly. Yeah.
You mentioned Mohawk College too, and we've had them on the air on a number of different programs here on CHML in terms of their skilled workforce program, because we certainly have a shortage of skilled workers throughout many industries in this province. So tapping into a local school that kind of is pumping out some pretty good students, as you have found out, is a great win-win situation. You needed something, there was something here local, and the program wins at the end of the day too, to see that their students are graduating and getting into the field.
Yeah, like a lot of my staff right now have come through, not just Mohawk College, but some others, but through their architectural technology programs. And for the students, it's a great way, it's a great, first kind of entry into the industry, and kind of getting out of the classroom and into a real world setting. Yeah. And it's amazing, that, like any job that you get into, it's all about like in the field, on the ground, actual nuts and bolts of learning, hands-on experience. Because even these students who've come out of the programs, like they still, it's amazing they still don't know anything about building code. They don't know anything about zoning bylaws. They don't know anything about construction. And they've spent, the last 4 years in these programs. So that's a bigger topic of our educational system and what types of skills are we actually teaching out there. Especially, in today's day and age, we need good skilled trades. We need a lot more skilled trades. But no, like, it's like anything, a lot of training, a lot of hand holding, a lot of, fixing errors on designs and teaching and educating on the code and zoning bylaws. But that takes time to kind of build up your team. And so right now we're hovering around 12 designers total. That's a mix of designers that are based here in Ontario, and we actually have a team in Brazil who actually helps us as well with design.
I was going to ask you about this. So we got a couple minutes left in this opening segment here. You are off to Brazil to, I guess, coordinate, meet, obviously congratulate your partners down there. How did this come about?
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, my very first co-op student, Freddie, he's actually Brazilian. He's from Brazil. He's an architect from down in Brazil.
So he's like, I know a guy.
Yeah. So as we were, scaling up and getting increasing demand for drawings, and we needed more help, right? And so Freddie's like, hey, I got some guys from back home who can help us with our design work. So so we started building up a team down there as well, with more designers. And that's the beauty of technology these days, is that really you can work from anywhere in the world. And there's been lots of times when I've been away myself from the office, and everything is humming along, and I'm still doing designs and drafting and consulting, and I could be someplace else. We went down to Brazil, and actually just came back and had a great time with the team down there.
Well, I want to get to more on this trip and how it went, and we're going to get to a lot of other stuff on the show today, including secondary units for your aging parents. We'll talk about a really scintillating dispute between a tenant and landlord, and also about modular units and garden suites, and a whole lot more still to come. A reminder to get more out of your home and book a free consultation today by going online to LegalSecondSuites.com. You are listening to The Building Hamilton Show with Ken Bekendam, brought to you by LegalSecondSuites.com on 900 CHML. Get more out of your home and book a free consultation today at LegalSecondSuites.com. That's LegalSecondSuites.com. We're here with Ken Bekendam, the owner of LegalSecondSuites.com, talking about everything under the sun when it comes to legal second suites, those basement apartments, those garden suites, those modular units that we'll get to later on in the show, too. We'll also talk about a tenant-landlord dispute that is really making some headlines. But before the break, we were talking about your recent trip to Brazil. Do they add any Brazilian flair to their design, things that are happening down there, that are trending down there, that they think, it might be somewhat popular up here in Canada?
Not so much, just because it is a completely different type of climate down there. The types of buildings that they have down there are completely different than what we have here in Ontario. So it's very much them learning our architecture here, our codes here, our zoning bylaws here. And they know it just as well, if not better, than some of our local designers.
Wow.
So like the whole purpose of that trip was really just to kind of build the team, right? And to, like any entrepreneur, who has employees, it's so important to be with your team, to be, with them face to face, so many of us these days are working from home or we're working remote, and, you kind of lose that company culture, that friendship and that, that accountability and everything that can happen when you're together in the same place. So, I do find it's important that, even for myself, that I hop on a plane, I go down there, I see these guys face to face, and we just, get better as a company.
That's pretty well. That's a great story, and I'm sure that was an awesome trip, and more to come in that respect. When it comes to LegalSecondSuites.com, we went to the origin story. You're figuring out the business. It's trial and error at the start. It's humming along now. You got a design team in Brazil. What's the biggest opportunity that, for people that you meet, they don't really realize or understand that's before them potentially?
Like people they don't understand or see the opportunity that's right in front of their eyes, right within their own home. They're looking at spaces within their home that is, full of boxes or junk or an old treadmill or old bikes or whatever, and they can't envision what that space could be transformed into. And so this is where, we get involved, and we do many consultations a week. We do free property assessments where we discuss your property, your spaces, and we help you basically understand what is right in front of you. That yes, you can do a legal secondary dwelling unit here, or you can put it in the garage, or you can put it on the second floor. You can, convert your empty basement into a unit, and this is how we go about it. Here's some of the, the basic building code requirements that we need to achieve, and, helping people just take that next step, right? It's like anything in life, that first step is the hardest step to take. And once you get going, then the momentum starts moving you forward and starts moving you much quicker. And so, we encourage people to, to book a free consultation with us. You can do right through our website, legalsecondsuites.com. And you can book it right with myself, right in the calendar. And we jump on a phone or a Zoom call, and we just talk about your project. We talk about your situation. Part of it is not just, assessing a property for zoning compliance or a building code. It's also talking about the individual's personal kind of financial situation, right. and is it going to be a feasible project for them? Helping people come to terms with reality, unfortunately, of current costs of construction, and how much money you do need sometimes to do a proper renovation. But then, also pointing people in the right direction to, some of these grant programs and incentive programs and energy rebate programs that are out there to help, make your renovation more affordable.
Right.
So basically we help people on all sorts of fronts. Basically, again, going back to my story of when I added, a legal secondary dwelling unit in my basement, and the financial stability that it brought my wife and I at that time, transformed our lives. And it's allowed me to then be able to go out and help other people. So I wish that for every single person listening on this call or on this show, to understand the power of that.
Yeah. I would imagine that the initial free consultation, you're kind of feeling the other person out to say, not only from a budgetary standpoint, but from a lifestyle perspective, is this going to work in the home? Is that part of the conversation?
First and foremost, it is about, making sure the zoning bylaw, it's going to be a permitted use,
right.
And making sure that there's no major building code issues that we won't be able to solve, right? Because if we can't, address those two items, then it's not going to be a feasible project, no matter how much money you have, right? But if we do realize that it's a feasible project, then we do talk about scope of work and what is it actually going to take to implement this unit. Is it a full gut and redo of that space, or is it just some modifications that have to be made? Maybe it's just adding in an egress window or adding some smoke detectors, or plopping in a kitchen or something. We're trying to frame that scope of work, right? And this is the big question that people have is, how much is it going to cost, to actually implement this unit? And the reality is it depends, right? Because every single space is different, right? And there's so many varying factors that will affect it. So, sometimes it does involve an on-site consultation where we actually walk through the space to help people kind of understand. Sometimes, it's done on Zoom, and people actually walk me around with their phone or their camera, and we can see so much just off of a quick video call.
Yeah, that's cool. You mentioned the kitchen. From a budgetary perspective, does there have to be all the elements in the kitchen, i.e., yes, there's got to be a sink, there's got to be cabinets, space for a fridge. What about a stove? Must there be a stove? Can you implement a hot plate? Are there certain codes and rules you must follow?
The building code is full of, the building code is two really thick, huge binders. It's a love-hate relationship with those binders. But the big thing with the stove is, so we do need a cooking facility.
Okay.
Of some type. Oftentimes, yes, it is a stove, a traditional stove, but, a hot plate does count as a cooking facility. But very oftentimes we are, designing in a stove. And sometimes that's the key difference between a quote unquote kitchen versus just like a wet bar in your basement where
Yeah.
you have kitchen cabinetry and a sink, right? What's the difference? Well, the difference is the cooking facilities. That's what makes that dwelling unit a habitable space, is that you can in fact go in there and you can actually cook food and live in that unit, right? So sometimes when we get involved in situations where somebody has put an illegal dwelling unit in their home, and for whatever reason they can't legalize it, and we have to do a deconversion of that space back into like a single family home, it involves removing that stove from that space.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. What's the most common question you get? Like when they're showing you their place on their phone, what's the most common thing you hear?
So a very common thing is, the ceiling height in the basement. Is the minimum height that we have going to be acceptable, right? And there's minimum heights under the code that we do need to achieve. And I say this all the time because people need to get this in their head if they're looking at a below grade basement space. Is that under the Ontario Building Code for houses that are older than 5 years, we need 6'8", 80 inches of finished height in our basement. And we need 6'5", 77 inches underneath the bulkhead. That's the Ontario Building Code.
Okay.
Here in Hamilton is actually following National Building Code for minimum ceiling heights in houses that have secondary dwelling units, and those heights are slightly less. So if you're right here in Hamilton, it's 77 inches, 6'5" for your main ceiling height, and then 73 inches, 6'1" underneath that bulkhead. So it's really important to understand those heights because, if you have to lower your basement floor to achieve that height, that could be very expensive. Yeah. Right. So that's like the big one that we look at is, our minimum ceiling heights. And then the other one is, sometimes the existing assemblies. So for instance, your existing drywalled ceiling in your basement. You already have an existing finished basement and you want to convert it into a legal apartment. We look at that existing ceiling and say, okay, does that existing assembly meet the minimum requirements under the code and we can leave it, or do we have to replace it? And actually 9 out of 10 times we do have to replace that.
Why is that? Is
ceiling.
That from an insulation standpoint?
Yeah, from both basically a fire separation perspective and a sound separation perspective.
Right.
So, so if you have a existing 1/2-inch regular drywall on your basement ceiling, an uninsulated joist cavity, that doesn't meet the minimum requirements, right? It's going to allow a lot of noise through, and the burn time on that drywall is not at the right requirement. So we remove that, and we encourage people to remove it anyways, because, when you're doing a conversion of your basement space, there is a lot of mechanical work that's involved. And, once you remove that drywall ceiling, you can do a full examination of all of your mechanicals, right? Your HVAC, your electrical, your plumbing systems. And then also, now we have the ability to do proper sound separation. And sound separation is our number one thing that we need to focus on. It's our number one complaint that we get in a multi-unit dwelling situation is sound, noise complaints, right? Anybody who's lived in any sort of multi-family living situation, whether it's a condo or a townhouse or row houses or what have you, they understand. They're intimate with noise transfer from other units, right? And so we always encourage people, tear it out. Let's properly sound rate it. Let's even go above minimum code for sound rating. Let's get some other products in there, such as Sonopan and other acoustical boards, and maybe it's double layer 5H with a green glue acoustical compound in the mix there to really get those noise levels down. Because we're trying to make, not just safe units, we're trying to make enjoyable living spaces for people to live in, right? Again, the quality of the units out there, because we're seeing a lot more renters out there now, the demand for higher caliber quality rental spaces is huge, right? And so if you do anything to make your unit just a little bit better than the rest, there'll be no shortage of people that want to rent your unit.
Absolutely. Get more out of your home and book a free consultation today with Ken and his team online, LegalSecondSuites.com. You're listening to the Building Hamilton Show with Ken Bekendam, brought to you by LegalSecondSuites.com on 900 CHML. I want to just go back to your first ever project. So you've got the company in place. You're going all in. Your first project in building a legal second suite. What do you remember most about it?
Well, so whenever you do your any project for the first time, it's a huge learning curve, right? Like you make so many mistakes on your first one, and part of our job now is to really help people minimize all of those mistakes that I made at the very beginning. And the biggest one and the most challenging one is really fire separation. Just not understanding how to properly fire rate a space and what's involved, what types of products are required to properly fire rate a space, right? How do you fire rate your pipes and your penetrations, any sort of wires or pipes that come through an assembly? How do you fire rate a joist cavity? How do you fire rate the ceiling? How do you fire rate around a service room, a mechanical room? What's a fire rated door? What does a 20-minute rated door actually mean? Mm-hmm. Where do you buy one? All of this type of stuff, and a lot of it is and was centered around, or the mistakes was centered around fire separation.
Right.
And so, and that's what's amazing about working with doing a properly permitted project is you can learn a lot from your building inspectors. And look, some building inspectors are phenomenal, others not so much. But the phenomenal ones are the ones where they'll actually take some time and they'll say, hey, how about you do it this way? It's easier to achieve compliance by doing such and such and such. And it's just trial and error doing a number of different projects that you start to learn the tricks of the trade, if you will. Mm-hmm. And just asking great questions, being very curious by nature, will help anybody in whatever field they're in to really quickly understand their space and just to get better at it.
We got just over a minute. Do you get a lot of calls or a lot of emails from people who have renovated their basement, let's say? They did so years ago, and they're thinking, I'm not sure it's up to code. I'm not sure the contractor, whoever was responsible, did it to code. How many calls do you get to say, can you fix what I've already done?
Yeah, like at the end of the day, everything under the building code is achievable, right? It just may not be feasible from a budget perspective to go back and redo work, right? Okay. And this is why it's so important to pull a building permit for your renovations, because this allows a third-party check, in this case, the city and building inspectors, to come in and review the work of the contractor to make sure that the work that was done is done correctly and that it doesn't have to be redone in the future. And this is where when we get involved with people who have already existing finished spaces that wasn't done under the building code, this is what I tell people: the more finished, the more frustrating it can be.
Yeah.
And the more you have to tear out and redo in order to get it done properly.
Yeah. The more costly too.
More costly. Yeah. And this can get very frustrating for people because they I got a beautiful basement, but now I got to basically tear it all out.
Yeah, just to get it to code.
Get
more out of your home and book a free consultation today with Ken and his team. LegalSecondSuites.com, and discover the possibilities of your property. Whether it's a garden suite or a basement apartment that you've always dreamed about, Ken and his team can make it a reality. Just before the break, I hinted at a really wild story, and there's been a lot of wild landlord-tenant stories. I've had a person who, they had a home, they owned the home, but they were renting somewhere else. They wanted to move back into their home, but the tenants they were renting to didn't want to leave. Eventually they did, but after several months. Another story, and I think this one's out of Burlington, where a woman is trying to move back into her Hamilton home, but there's tenants there. They don't want to leave. It's going to the landlord-tenant advisory board, and it's just a big mess. And I'm sure you've seen and heard of many of these stories. What's your sense of what's going on these days? I know there's a huge backlog at the board, but what's your take?
Yeah, so basically right now, there's unfair policies on both sides of the equation, right? We have unfair policies and regulations, that make it very difficult for tenants. We also have regulations that make it very difficult for landlords. And what we see happening out there is that, basically people are getting to an impasse where there's really, it's very difficult to move forward. And, even your everyday homeowner, property owner, who's not even like a landlord, is getting caught in the crosshairs. And this is what we're seeing happening with this landlord-tenant issue, where basically the property was sold and a legitimate home buyer who's coming in and buying it as their primary home is not able to move into the home because the tenant does not want to leave the property. Yeah. And, so there's regulations there that make it very difficult to enforce that tenant to move. And we have innocent home buyers here who are now in financial jeopardy. They're actually homeless, because they sold their other home and they're unable to move into their new home. And this is a terrible situation where we have, legitimate home buyers who are now basically being forced into homelessness because of our backwards policies at the landlord-tenant board under the RTA. So, it's very challenging. It's very unfortunate to see. And what happens is, out of desperation, people take matters into their own hands, right? Out of survival mode here is what's happening. And this is where we see a lot of, terrible things that happen that people, they shouldn't be doing. But because of inaction from our government, they take matters into their own hand. And so in this case, these people, they took their trailer and they backed their trailer into the driveway of their home, blocking in the tenant's car. And basically now they're camping out on the property. So now for the current owner of that property who's trying to sell, now they're getting themselves into a real pickle because they got a tenant who doesn't want to move out. Now they got some random, couple camping out on the driveway who technically haven't closed on the home yet. So they don't even own that property. They're not a tenant. So now he's got kind of two sets of squatters on the property going on. So I don't know legally, how it's all going to play out. But yeah, it's a very interesting story to follow. But and this story just happened to make it into the media. There is thousands of stories out there of similar situations where, there is legitimate legal reasons, why a tenant has to vacate a property, but they just simply refuse. And you feel for the tenant too, because you listen to their story, and they don't have enough income there to afford another rental unit, given the current market. So from the tenant's perspective, they're also out of survivorship, trying to protect their family, not to be forced out onto the street, and for them to become homeless. So it's very, very challenging. It's very, very challenging. But, we do need a fair and balanced approach to the Residential Tenancies Act to protect both landlords and tenants. A lot of issues that are before the board right now is non-payment of rent issues, right? And, we live in a democratic and fair society. We should be honoring our commitments to one another. If you're going to sign up for a service, from a provider, pay your bill, right? That's just the fair and right thing to do. But, we as in our regulations, we're protecting basically people who don't want to pay their rent. And it's again, the vast majority of rental units are provided by mom and pop landlords. It could be your mother, could be your brother, could be your sibling, could be your children who are providing rental units. And when they don't receive the rent payment, they can't cover the mortgage payment. They can't pay the property taxes. They can't pay the utilities.
It's a massive domino effect.
It's a massive domino effect. And unfortunately, we see countless stories of just very innocent, everyday homeowners who get caught in the crosshairs, for sure.
Is this a solvable solution, and does it have to happen from or by the provincial government? Are they the ones to drop the hammer to say, all right, enough's enough, this is the way it's going to be?
Yeah, look, no, a lot of things stem from the top, right? Provincial policy. We have the Residential Tenancies Act, which is a provincial legislation in Ontario here. But the reality is the province is not seriously looking at the Residential Tenancies Act right now. And it's very political, okay? You think the vast majority of people, well, not the vast majority, but a sizable, number of the population are renters, right? And so, they don't want to wade into a political mess of kind of revamping the RTA to make it more balanced, and present themselves as, just benefiting the wealthy or the privileged or the existing homeowners and stuff like that. So it's challenging politically to get movement on changes to the RTA. But as we see more stories of innocent people getting caught in the crosshairs, hopefully our province will start to take a more serious look at it, because it's a lot of issues are around the RTA. Like why do we see a increasing interest in Airbnbs and short-term rentals? Well, because we're having issues in the long-term rental space with long-term tenants, right? It's not that the everyday landlord wants to go into short-term rentals, because it is a lot more work. When you're doing a short-term Airbnb, like it's a lot more management to when you have people coming in and out of the property all the time, a lot more wear and tear on the property. Not every single person wants to take on that extra level of work to do a short-term rental. But when they are having challenges at the RTA with long-term tenants, they're going to Airbnbs out of desperation. And yes, you can make more money at it sometimes, but for a lot of landlords and investors, it's not all just about the money. It's also quality of life. And how much like a lot of these rental investment properties are supposed to be passive investments. We don't want to be actively having to every single week having to be dealing with the property.
That's an issue,
So if we cleaned up the landlord, the Residential Tenancies Act, it would alleviate people's desire to go into short-term rentals and Airbnbs. So anyways, it's a layered onion of challenges.
It is.
Across the board. It's not an easy solution. We're seeing still a lot of issues right here in Hamilton with encampments and tents and tiny shelters. And, on one hand, we have the government saying, yes, we need more housing. It's a crisis. We're now going to be putting people into sheds on parking lots to give them a place to live. But then on the other hand, the municipalities are enacting bylaws that throw so much more red tape and bureaucracy onto the everyday homeowner who does have rental properties. Like Hamilton here, they have a rental licensing bylaw. And if you actually look through the requirements of what they want, it's if they fully enact it, like they're going to be pushing out a lot of people out of rental units and onto the street. And so it's like you can't have your cake and eat it too. Like there's got to be fair policies on both sides. Yes, I understand. We have to create safe, habitable spaces for people. But at the same time, like our municipalities also kind of make it very, very difficult for people. Just to get a building permit.
We got 2 minutes left. I know that the province and the premier has said that they want to build 1.5 million homes within the next 10 years, and it's certainly a lofty goal. To build a legal second suite, how many more legal second suites can you build in that time span? I would guess a vast amount more than what the premier is saying.
Well, so like we're talking about, increasing density within our existing housing stock, within our existing houses, within our existing buildings, using existing sewers, streets, sidewalks, water, sanitary systems, wastewater treatment plants. Like it makes 100% sense. We need the province to incentivize the everyday homeowner who has that existing single detached home to put in a secondary unit in their home. They have to incentivize these folks, or else they won't do it on their own. If there's no financial benefit, people won't do it, right? Yes, there's a financial benefit, for bringing in financial stability into your life, having that extra rental income coming in. But there's a lot of costs associated with increasing or adding a unit in your home, right? And that's a big barrier to entry for a lot of people, is just a pure cost of actually they may want to add the unit, but they can't afford to add the unit. So our governments, should be, allocating some funding to just incentivizing people, whether through tax credits or tax breaks or straight up cash to build these units.
That would be a great start. Speaking of starts, we're far away from the start. We're at the end of this show, and I hope you learned a lot about LegalSecondSuites.com. The main takeaway for you, get more out of your home. There's tons of possibilities out there, including booking a free consultation today with the team you want on your team. That's LegalSecondSuites.com. Ken, thanks again for coming in, and enjoy the rest of your weekend from all of us here on 900 CHML.